Well, hello and welcome to another podcast with me, Troy Francis. It is, what time is it? 10:30 in the UK on Monday, the 27th of January. And so I'm a little bit late recording the show for you guys today and putting it out. So apologies for that. But it's been a bit of a mental day. I've been working on some stuff which I've had to get sorted out, and then I had to go into the city centre, the seedy heart of darkness of Soho, in order to meet up with a friend who's in town for a little while. And then I came back to record this wonderful show for you guys before hitting the sack, as we like to say. And today, what I'm going to talk about is why should you study social dynamics at all? Why should you study the sexual marketplace? Why is this stuff really of any interest? Before I do, just a quick plug for my books. I've got 11 books out in a bundle of PDFs, which is called Renegade Dating Blueprint. It's only $39 at the moment. So if you're interested in my thoughts on dating, sex, game, how to get it, and all of that good stuff, then do hit the link below. And also, do remember to hit subscribe to this channel and give me a like as well. Finally, if you want to get on board with my daily email, which you really should because it's awesome, there is also a link below for that free article to your inbox every Monday to Friday. But anyway, after lots and lots of people complaining bitterly about my intros being too long, I want to crack right into it now. So let's get going. So why study dating? Why study the sexual marketplace? What is so interesting about this? And this is a topic that I've wanted to address on the channel for a little while anyway, but it was also brought to mind by the fact that a couple of people actually have commented after we've done Rule Zero episodes, both on my channel, which it was on my channel on Saturday, but also on other people's channels. You will always get some guy, some smart ass who will come in and say, oh, you know, these guys, they need to stop talking about this manosphere stuff. They need to stop talking about this intersexual dynamic stuff. Why don't they take a break, or why don't they move on to something else? Blah, 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 blah. And that always seems to me to be a rather unusual thing to say, since you're listening to a show that is dedicated to understanding sexual dynamics, social dynamics, and the sexual marketplace. It's a bit like saying to the anchor of a sports program, oh, why don't you stop talking about that sports stuff? It's a bit boring. Why don't you take a break or do something else? Well, no. The sports program is there to talk about sports in the same way that Rule Zero and other shows like that are there to talk about gender dynamics between the sexes, dating, the sexual marketplace, and all of that stuff, the red pill, if you like. That is what its function is. So if you don't want to hear about those topics, then that's completely within your gift. But at the same time, you should probably be listening to a different show, because there's no point in telling a leopard not to have spots. The leopard has got spots. If you don't like it, then, well, you're probably going to get eaten by a leopard. I'm not saying that would happen in the case of Rule Zero or this channel, but you know what I mean. It's a bit of a category error, in a way, to say to people making a show about something, don't make the show about that thing, because that is what the show is about. But anyway, rant over. That got me to thinking about this whole issue. And, guys will say things like, oh, why are you so interested in this stuff? Haven't you got anything else going on? People will also say, it's all been done before. It's all been talked about already. Is there nothing else that you can talk about? Can you not expand the subject area? And people will say things like, haters will say things like, well, isn't it time you grew out of all this stuff and you went and, did something else instead? And, everyone's entitled to their opinion, of course. But here's what I think. Firstly, I think that relationships, the way that we relate to one another, is of such monumental importance in people's lives that this is a topic that's never really going to get old. I mean, I still find it absolutely fascinating to find out about dating, how other people operate in the sexual marketplace, even after all of this time, even after having studied this stuff for 15 or 16 years, I still find it fascinating. So this week I'm going to be interviewing Tristan Tate on the channel. We're going to be having a chat. Tristan Tate, if you don't know, is one of the infamous Tate brothers. I interviewed Andrew about a year ago. I'm going to speak to his brother Tristan on Thursday. And he is an elite level playboy, let's say. He runs a very successful business based out of Romania. He meets lots of women as a part of that business and also in his travels, because him and his brother travel a lot around the world, and they are, successful. They're very rich. They're multimillionaires. This guy has a blue check Instagram account with, I forget how many followers, but he's got a hell of a lot of followers. He was a kickboxing champion, athlete, tall, well-built, good-looking, all of this kind of thing. So what does all of that mean? Well, it means that he, as a matter of course, just as a matter of his career and the way that he is, gets access to, I suppose, the highest echelons of the sexual marketplace, if you like. But he also gets to see, on a global scale, or at least as far as he travels, he gets to see and understand a bit about how the dating market operates internationally. And he gets to see it as a guy at the very top of the tree. Now, whether you like him or not is sort of secondary here. I mean, he is a guy who is clearly a fine specimen as far as the girls are concerned. And so that means he's getting a very insider view, if you like. And I think it's absolutely fascinating to have a conversation with somebody like that, because what he's going to be able to provide is a sort of a look behind the curtain, if you like. And I said on Twitter earlier, if you imagine the guy that got married at, maybe he was a bit of a player in his early 20s, learned a bit about dating, about game, approached some girls, got into some, had some fun, had some one-night stands, some concurrent non-monogamous relationships and things like that. And then in his sort of mid to late 20s, he threw in the towel, met a girl that he liked, got married. That guy might be able to teach you a little bit about his experience, but he's not going to be able to give you the depth of insight that somebody like a Tristan Tate is going to be able to give you. And so that's what I've always aimed to do, both on this channel, but also in my writings as well. And if you read even something like How to Be an Arsehole, which I published, it's going back a couple of years now, and my books previous to that, going back all the way to 7 Laws of Seduction, what you'll find is that I often will refer not only to my own experiences, but also to the experiences of other people. And the other people that I tend to reference are guys who, to be frank, are chads or naturals in the dating world. These aren't guys who are creating content like this. These aren't guys who are making blogs or podcasts or videos about this stuff. These are guys that are just going out there and doing it because it comes naturally to them. And the reason that I think it's important to talk to these guys is because they don't always want to make content about it themselves, or in some cases they're perhaps not very good at creating content, or it's just not their thing. And so I think it's valuable for myself but mainly for you guys that I'm able to bring you insights from these people, and I'm able to interpret them for you because, as I say, think about the benefit that somebody who's an elite player in that space can bring to the table, as opposed to some dude who is barely past 30 himself and doesn't really have an enormous amount of experience other than getting wifed up when he was, frankly, probably a bit too young to do so. Nice drink of soda water there. So I'll be interviewing Tristan later in the week. But I mentioned that because I think it illustrates this wider point, which is that this study, and it is a study. It's almost a sociological interest that I have, a psychosociological interest, let's say, in dating dynamics globally. This study of that field is, in my view, ever fascinating and, let's face it, ever changing. Because when I first came into this space, which was back in, I suppose, 2004, 2005, I always tell the same story. Basically, when the game came out, that coincided with the rise of online forums, blogs, things of that nature. And then later we got YouTube and podcasts and so on. But when I got into this space, the landscape was very, very different in terms of dating, even though it was only 15 years ago. We're not talking 100 years ago. It was a decade and a bit ago, decade and a half ago. And there was no Instagram. There was no Facebook at that time. There was no instant messaging. There wasn't anything like WhatsApp. There was no Tinder. Online dating really was in its infancy. This is a radically, radically different ball game to where we're to the one in which we are playing now. And so, if that happened in those 15 years, do you think the next 15 years are going to be static? Do you think that we've now reached peak modernity and that's it? And now we're just going to have reiterations of Tinder, just updates of Tinder. Instagram's going to reboot itself every couple of years and that's going to be it. Do you think that we've reached the end of history? Well, no, of course we haven't. And if anything, I think the reality is, or my prediction is, that things are going to move faster and change even more profoundly, even in the next 5 years, than they have in those whole last 15 years combined. And that is why shows like Rule Zero exist. That is why channels like Ryan Stone's exist, or Rollo Tomasi's Rational Male, or Rich Cooper's channel, or John Modern Life Dating, or any of us. The reason that we create this content and we put this content out is because this is a dynamic subject matter. This isn't a subject matter that is finished. Somebody said, maybe it was in one of the comments on Rule Zero, or perhaps it was on Twitter, but somebody said the other day, oh, isn't this enough of all of this stuff? Women aren't that difficult to figure out. Well, yes, that's true. There are certain psychological truths, if you like. There are certain dynamics that occur in dating, in relationships between men and women that are that don't have infinite variations, let's say. Although at the same time, they kind of do, because obviously every individual is different. Nothing is ever quite the same depending on the people involved. But yes, there are certain dynamics that are known to us that have probably been explored to a significant degree. But that doesn't mean that they're not changing as a result of these changes in the marketplace that we are seeing, and these changes in technology and these changes in the way that human beings interact and relate to one another. And so the value of this as an area of study, and the value of the content about it, is that it's documenting that and it is explicating it. And you've got guys like myself, like John in Tokyo, who are out there experiencing the real world, out there working with clients, out there researching this stuff the whole time, who are bringing you, or bringing the audience, real insights from the streets, from other guys in the same field, and presenting it to you in an easily digestible form. And all I can say is that for myself, when I was a bit younger, I really wish that same level of material, that same level of information had been available. In fact, to be honest, if any information had been available, I didn't have any of this stuff throughout all of my 20s. And for that reason, what happened in my 20s? Well, I ended up in a very bad relationship with a completely unsuitable girl that was disastrous, that went on for far, far, far too long, about 4.5 years, because I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know that it should have ended probably after about a couple of years. And on top of that, I then got into... Things improved, I suppose, actually, after I became single, and I started to really hit the clubs and things in Manchester, and to meet new girls, and I had a lot of wild times up there. I had a lot of adventures, but it was very untutored. I didn't really know what I was doing. And if I'd have had just like a tenth of the material that's available now, just by going onto YouTube, I would have had a very, very, very different experience in those years, and probably a much more enjoyable, I don't want to say enjoyable, a much more fruitful experience, let's say, because, as I say, I didn't know what I was doing in terms of game. So I didn't know, the only thing that I was good at was mass approaching. That's all I knew. And to be fair to my younger self, even though I'd never read a book on dating dynamics in my life, and there was no such thing as coaches or anything in those days, it was, it's just unheard of. I did pretty well, but I did pretty well because I was very persistent and relentless, and I just went to the club and chatted up every girl in the place until finally I would, get some sort of results. And so that persistence and that horniness, frankly, kind of saw me through. But if I'd have had some instruction, if I'd have known what I was doing, if I'd have known some techniques and some mindsets, then things would have been very, very different, exponentially different. And also, I lacked any knowledge in the I suppose the theoretical background. I lacked any knowledge in how dating dynamics and relationships really worked. Yes, there were things like problem pages where in newspapers and magazines where you could write in and say, "Oh, I've got this problem with my girlfriend. What do I do?" But of course, for a start, the people answering those questions were usually female, so the information was coming from a very specific angle. And secondly, it was an incredibly uncool thing to do. I wouldn't be writing into a problem page or anything. I used to read the answers sometimes, but there wasn't any sort of. It wasn't like now, where if you've got a situation going on, you can kind of go onto Reddit and post a description of what's happening, and then get like 100 replies from guys in the same hour. It's just not. What we've got now with this ability to swap notes, as they say, is incredible. And yeah, I really wish I'd have had it. I'd have had it then. So really, as a decade, my 20s were suboptimal in some ways. Now, I don't regret anything. I don't want to go back and change it, even if I could, because that's not the way to view life. And I had a great time still, and it was good. But the truth is, it could have been better. I could have avoided a lot of mess ups, and I could have probably had a lot more fun, or some more fun anyway, if I'd have applied this knowledge. And so that's why this knowledge is important, and that's why there's this drive for some of us to create content around it, so that we can help other dudes in that same situation. But as I say, you have to remember as well that things are now changing very fast. Things changed in the last. Okay, so let's say between the ages of when I was 20 and 30, in that 10 years, things in the dating scene didn't really change very much. Clubs started to become a bigger thing. I started going to nightclubs. That changed it for me a bit, but clubs have been around before. Things hadn't changed significantly in the sort of probably even the 90s, maybe even the 80s. Things hadn't really changed very significantly in that 30-year period as far as dating was concerned, as far as meeting girls was concerned. You would just go to the bar or the club or the lounge or whatever it was and have a few drinks and go and try and talk to some girls. There wasn't really any shift in the dynamics. And then between the ages of 30 and 40, the whole thing changed exponentially because of the rise of the internet, because of the rise of smartphones and the rise of the apps. So, and as I say, I don't see that slowing down anytime soon. And now we've got things like AI coming into the equation as well. How's that going to affect it? We've got cryptos, we've got guys who are living off the grid to some extent, like I'm not off the grid, but the guys who are now self-employed because the internet's given them the ability to do that, and that changes what one can do as part of one's lifestyle. Because I don't have those regular sort of work hours anymore. I do work every day during the daytime, but you know what I mean. I can shift around my schedule. So what does that mean in terms of how I can approach dating? and all of this stuff. So there are so many dynamics involved here and so many shifting dynamics. It's just a movable feast, guys. And so we need to document this. So, well, I mean, as I say, if you think, oh, this is all done, it's not worth studying anymore, everything that's been said, that can be said, has been said, and so there's no point in doing any of this anymore, then that's fine. That's your right to think that. But then maybe, you've got to a point where it's time for you to move on and, consume some different content. Maybe it's just you've, for whatever reason, in your personal journey, you've reached the kind of the end of the road with it for the time being. I mean, what you may well find, because I've certainly found this, is that, you go away for a period of time and then you come back, you're drawn back to that content because something changes in your circumstances. So maybe you get into a relationship and then that relationship finishes, and you decide to, you need to find out what's going on. So you come back to the source. But what you also have to remember is there are a lot of new guys coming into the space as well who don't know anything about this stuff. You'd be surprised the number of dudes who just don't have the awareness. I mean, you might think, and I'm guilty of this as well, it's easy for people who've been involved in this kind of area for some time to just assume that everyone else is on the same page, but they're not. There are guys who are my age, there are guys in their 40s who have no idea about any of this stuff. And so there's also, to some degree, a duty of care to those people as well. There is a duty, or at least there is a motivation, let's say, to provide an explanation to those guys of how things are. So when you're putting out content about this stuff, what you tend to be doing is, firstly, you're putting out different sorts of content, really. You might be looking at old topics that have been discussed many times before, but trying to put a slightly different spin on it, or putting a spin on it that pertains to your particular experience. So, I mean, there are stories, obviously my stories are very different to anybody else's because they haven't lived the same life as me. So I can put a slightly different spin on it. I mean, if you've read my books about like 50 Shades of Game and so on, I've got this whole wealth of experience in the sort of fetishy BDSM type scene. And that brings a whole different slant onto this content. Same with swingers parties and even strip clubs and things like that. So I've got insights in those areas that other people just don't touch because they haven't experienced it. So again, this is all part of that sort of global sharing of notes where guys come together and everybody's got their own take. If you look at the content creators I mentioned earlier, everyone is different or slightly different. And that is a good thing. It wouldn't be any good if everybody was the same. But the fact that everybody's slightly different, everybody's got a slightly different niche in this space, makes it, in my view, a very healthy and valuable thing. And look, there are going to be some content creators that you resonate with and some that you won't. And it's the same for me. There are some people who, every time they release a video, I watch the video without fail. Because I really like the way that they present, I really like their thinking, I really like whatever it is. And there are other people that I just don't engage with at all because they're just not speaking for me. And that's going to be the same for you as well. But don't shoot the messenger or one of the messengers because the message that they're bringing is a valuable one. It just might not be the messenger who quite resonates with you, if you know what I mean. But that doesn't undermine the value of what is being done. But for me, anyway, I mean, I find the whole thing fascinating, and I want to go in two directions at once. I'm going backwards in terms of looking at older material around dating, around relationships, around the art of seduction. So I'm talking about dangerous liaisons, and then going back even further into sort of French 18th century literature to look at the techniques that were being used then. I mean, of course, we have Casanova as well, but yeah, like going backwards and looking at the sort of genesis of this stuff, but also staying at the cutting edge as well, and going around and seeking out advice, finding out the stories of people who are at the cutting edge doing this kind of thing, who are somebody like Tristan Tate, or somebody like my friend Alex over in Poland, who is a day game guy, who's in his he's a mature gentleman, let's say, and he is still getting great results out in Poland. And I find this stuff absolutely scintillating, and I hope that you guys do too, because what I want to do as we go forward is just to continue to share this and to deepen and to broaden the research. Now, another thing I would say, though, is for myself, for my own channel, it would be unfair, I think, to say that I don't cover anything else, because actually I do. And I mean, I've been spending a lot of time working on researching into the charisma stuff, researching into body language, researching into elements of psychology and so on for the dark triad stuff. And so I've tried to bring those extra flavors to the palette through my own work, if you like, filtered through my own personal experiences, which are not going to be for everybody, but which are certainly distinctive and certainly different to a lot of other people, not least because I am a European, guys, and I am based in the UK, and I spend a lot of I travel around Europe, Berlin, and so on, and so I'm not an American and I'm not a Canadian, which means that there is a different slant from my side of things as well. But I think everybody in concert provides a really useful overview of what's happening out there, and for me, I don't think it's going anywhere. I'm glad that it isn't going anywhere, because even if I wasn't creating this stuff, this content, I would be keeping an eye on it, let's say, even if I wasn't consuming it as heavily as I do now, because obviously I do now, but that's sort of for work purposes, because you've got to know what's happening in your industry. But I think even if I wasn't and I was doing something completely different, I would still be following this material, because it's very clear to me that we are living in a world that is only going to start to change even more radically than it has. Things are only speeding up, it's not going to slow down. I heard it said, and I've used it in the video course that I recorded last week, which there will be more news about very soon. This is the time things are, how do you put it? It is the time when dating dynamics are the most complicated they've ever been. But it's also the time when they are the least complicated that they ever will be again. And what I mean by that is that, yes, things have changed at this rapid rate, and it's almost unrecognizable now than to how things were 10, 15 years ago. But my God, in the next 5, 10, 15 years, things are going to change even more. And, I find it fascinating because, and guys will say, well, it's all about, you're only interested in sex. Isn't there anything else, to it than that? And yes, of course there is. Absolutely, 100% there is. And again, I intend to cover more sort of general lifestyle stuff on this channel as well, which I do already. But it all interlinks. This is the culture. This is about society. I mean, yes, it's about sex, because how men and women, how people come together sexually is a social issue, but it's about so much more than that, because the way in which that happens affects everything else in the culture as well. And that, looking at that as a microcosm for the culture, gives us a very good idea of the wider shifts that are taking place at a very grassroots level. And I think that is incredibly important. So anyway, bit of a rant this week. I suppose that's me justifying my job in a way. Maybe you agree. Maybe you don't agree. Maybe you think it's all overkill and it should all just be left in a box back in 2005 and we should all talk about something else. But I just don't see it like that. I really don't. Because I think the most important thing in most people's lives are the relationships that they have and how those relationships are conducted, right? And because all of that is changing and has changed and will continue to change so dramatically, it's something we need to talk about. It's something we need to keep on top of. And that's how I see it anyway. That's what I'm doing here. And I hope that you are on board with that. I hope that you appreciate, not appreciate giving me a pat on the back, but I hope that you get value from the content that I'm delivering. And, if you have suggestions, if you have things that you want me to cover or to research for you or to put a greater focus on, then please tell me. Leave me a comment under this video. Drop me an email, troy@realtroyfrancis.com. send me a tweet, whatever you want to do. But just give me a message, and I will certainly look at doing that. I'm always open. I keep saying it. And I have done quite a number of reader question type videos, and I'll continue to do them because I want to talk about what you want to hear about, right? I want to talk about the content within this context, this overall context of sort of dating and social dynamics. I want to cover what you want to hear covered. So do let me know what that is, and I'll do my absolute best to get a video done for you or some other piece of content. So anyway, there you go. I will leave it for now because my bed is calling. It's getting late at night and I need to get some sleep. As I said, do grab Renegade Dating Blueprint, 11 of my best books on dating game, the sexual marketplace. Link below, $39. Do get on my daily email list. Again, the link is below. And do hit subscribe and the notifications bell for this YouTube channel. If you are watching this on YouTube, if you're on a different platform, then please go over to YouTube, search Troy Francis and subscribe to my channel because that is where all the juice is going at the moment. It's where most of my efforts are going currently. So do get on board. There's some exciting stuff coming up for you in 2020. I'll leave it there. Bye-bye.